let's get some balance back into our lives. This is episode 22 of the Women Inspired Podcast. Welcome to the Women Inspired Podcast. I'm your host, April Seifert. There is nothing more powerful than a woman who is inspired to action, and that's my number one goal, to inspire you, my listeners, to take action in your lives. Each week, I get to interview some of the most inspiring women, and I'm bringing those interviews to you. Let's do it. Jessica DeGroot is the president and founder of the ThirdPath Institute, and she is passionately committed to helping men and women as parents and leaders follow an integrated approach to work and life. For over 16 years, Jessica and the ThirdPath community have provided coaching, training, and workbooks to individuals and families looking for new and better ways to support success at work and success in life. They also work with leaders who want to follow this approach, helping them discover new and more satisfying solutions for themselves and helping them become role models for others. Hello, everybody. I'm so excited that you tuned in this week because we have a really phenomenal guest who I know is going to be sharing some content and some information that is very applicable to all of us, the way we lived our lives, et cetera, et cetera. I'm already ahead of myself and I haven't even introduced her. I'm that excited. So welcome Jessica DeGroot to the podcast today. I'm so happy to have you here.
I'm so glad to be here and so inspired by what you're doing.
I'm so excited. Yeah, it's amazing how many phenomenal women there are out there, including yourself. So it's really great to have you here.
Great. Wonderful.
So help us get to know you a little bit. Tell us a little bit about your background and who you are and all of those good things you want to know about somebody before you kick into their story and really get to know them.
I am somebody, luckily, who has always said, you know what, here's the rational answer. Why don't I do that? And sometimes the world tells us that we can't do that. But I've gone ahead and said, well, that doesn't make sense to me, so I think I'll just go ahead and do it my way. So a long, long time ago, I remember thinking to myself, I would like to be successful at work, and I would also have want lots and lots of time with my kids. And again, I think the world told me, nope, that's not what's possible. And I said, no, I think I'll do it differently than that. And so way back in college, I started interviewing people who looked like they had started figuring this out. And this is a while ago, back in the 80s. And what I saw was, surprisingly, who they married made a big difference. And marrying somebody who really saw that same vision and wanted you to succeed in work, and they also wanted to have time with family, made a big difference. So I don't even think I knew I was doing it, but I think I was walking around looking for who my husband is of 26 years. He was somebody who really had made a huge life change to stop doing a line of work so he'd have more time for life. And when our children were born, we both knew we wanted to actually redesign how we did our work so we could both share taking care of the kids. And that was a long time ago, 25 years ago. And I think a lot of people looked at our life and said, that looks pretty cool. You should write a book about it. And instead, for better and worse, I started a whole nonprofit, and it's called the ThirdPath Institute. And we've learned so much about how to help young couples think about this today, but more importantly, or just as importantly, how you can really move ahead in your career and be this amazing, what we call integrated leader, someone who's a professional, who's practiced this their entire career. And it turns out what we do in that integrated way throughout our career actually makes us more equipped to handle today's crazy 24/7 world. So without even planning it, because remember, whatever it was, a long time ago, there wasn't even email. It turns out those skills that Jeff and I learned when our daughter was born actually helped us be smarter about how to do work today. And it's just been really fun to go for the ride on that.
That's so awesome. So I'm actually peeking at your website right now, and I have to read just a little snippet of it so that people who are listening to this get a feel for this integrated life and this message that you're putting out there. So just a few headlines from the website. It says, "What does it mean to lead an integrated life? You want and need time for family, for personal relationships. You also need and want to work. There's a different way. You can lead an integrated life and create your third path." And I'm so curious about all of this work and what you're uncovering. So tell me a little bit more about the organization itself and what messages you're putting out there, what content, what educational resources. Just help us understand it a little bit more.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think what we've learned is people are at different places in this journey. Your listeners are going to include some people who've already embraced this, and they are already out there saying, you know what, I want to approach my career in a way where I have time for life, and they're one of many, many stories. And by the way, all the way through, we've been careful to include men as examples of these integrated leaders. So one of the dads that we work with, when his baby was born, worked a 4-day work week, and he learned those integration skills around how to do work and how to take care of the baby. Now his baby is 20 years old. So, this is men and women thinking differently. And what we've learned is that some of your listeners are doing it today, but they might feel like they are alone in their organization doing it that way. And so we've started creating communities of people where they can meet others like them who are doing it this way and learn from each other. And sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it's hard because the work environment we're in. Sometimes it's hard because it's just hard. And you'll have a period when you feel completely out of balance. So having a community of support has been a real good service we provide to people. But then there's some people who are just starting out. They want to think about how to do this now, and they haven't really explored the idea, but they're excited about the idea. We have something called an OMG group, an Overwhelm Mitigation Group.
Nice.
And so it's actually from a wonderful book that was written by Bridget Schulte called Overwhelmed: Work, Love, and Play When No One Has the Time. And she really did us a great service. She has a big part in the middle of the book. It's all about ThirdPath Institute and how we help couples think about these things. So our OMG groups are about helping people launch into this idea and decrease the overwhelm in their life, increase their effectiveness at work, and have more time and energy for those fun things that they want. That are, I like my work, but I want something else too.
That's awesome. I'm peeking at some of this work that you're doing, and you're talking about just these incredibly, incredibly important things that to some of us seem really aspirational and so difficult because we hear it everywhere, right? Like work-life balance and trying to make sure that you make time for everything. And obviously we as individual people understand how important it is to have a life outside of our jobs. So that may be your partner, that may be your child, that may be travel or a hobby or something else. But sometimes it can feel really impossible to find that balance. Do you find that with people when they're at the beginning of this journey?
Oh, and I would even rephrase that, even when you're on the journey. Because it's, that's part of our new world. It's a great thing. Technology has allowed us to connect with anybody, anywhere, anytime, but it also means that work can follow us everywhere all the time. And so, there are, not only is it hard to get started, kind of like going to the gym. Along comes January 1st, you've pledged you want to lose that last 10 pounds, and you're going to go to the gym. And what, you really see is the same thing with developing integration skills. It is a muscle set that you have to kind of practice and learn. And what we've seen is it's the act of doing it over and over again, just like going to the gym, that helps you get better at it. So one of the reasons why we like these OMG calls is that you're on a call once a month with a group of people who are trying to learn this muscle set, just like you are. And then we actually pair you up with 2 people in the middle of the month. So you can say, I know she was talking about how we're supposed to not constantly check our email and actually create some quiet time for focus work. It's just so hard. But because the other person's struggling and you're trying, over the course of the year, you're getting smarter about this stuff. And it's the act of learning from the failures that's as important as learning the concepts. And so even then, when you get really good at it, like myself, I am pretty darn good at this. Life will throw you a curveball, or work will throw you a curveball. And so you'll still have to kind of reapply some of these techniques. And that's just the truth. It's never done. You're never crossed, like exercise. It's not like you're like, never have to exercise again. It's actually something you just have to commit to for a while.
Yep.
But it does, I think what changed for me, because I'm out there trying to talk about this and I'm supposed to act like I know it all the time. And I'm always very authentic with people and tell them what's really going on. But, there are times when it's really difficult. And I used to say, oh, gosh, who am I to say anything? And now I'm like, oh, it's one of those difficult times again. What can I do to make it better? And that's a real change that I've seen in myself.
What you just said right there, who am I to be telling people how they can do this? Did that voice or did that belief or that, did that exist in you as you were beginning this organization? Because I think for a lot of people who want to share their experiences with others or share something that they've learned with other people, there's this moment in the beginning where, and I'm so speaking from personal experience here, but there's this moment in the beginning where you pause before you even take the first step thinking, who in the heck do I think I am that I'm going to go do this thing? Who am I to be able to tell people how they can live their lives better or make these improvements? Did you feel that way? And how has it changed?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Oh, and some incredible flops. Oh, my goodness. I mean, I think you have to give yourself permission to have some incredible flops, because I can tell you about those too. But absolutely, there have been times when I've done it the wrong way and learned something from it and like, oh, never do that again. And there's definitely times when I've gotten up and my own life looks like it's really messed up at that moment. And like, how am I supposed to talk to these people about work-life balance when people don't even like the word work-life balance anymore? But actually, I like the word work-life balance because our body tells us, are you feeling in balance or out of balance? I believe our bodies tell us a lot. You're exhausted. You're probably out of balance. So I actually think the word is helpful, although we do say what we're trying to help people is follow an integrated path where they're integrating their different selves, the work self, the family self, the other self, all together into one. But balance is an important concept. And so anyways, I get up in front of people, I'm talking to them about all these ideas, and my own life is feeling out of balance. And, what I've had to really learn is, one, to be gentle with myself, but two, I have a number of people who are very close to me who I can call up and show my honest feelings to. And so if I'm about to get up in front of somebody when life isn't feeling so good, I can call up my friend and say, okay, just 10 minutes. I got to tell you what's really going on. Here's the truth. And I can kind of let go of the anxiety around that. And then when I get up in front of people, I can say, hey, you know what? It's hard. And, ask me about this week. It's pretty terrible, but I can say it in a very light and simple way because I've kind of told a true story to somebody else. And I'll say it. One other thing I think that's helped me, and I think this is an important one that I probably is the most important one, is that I've always tried to continue to practice what I preach. So I want to live an integrated life myself. And in the moments when it's been hard, I've learned the most. So instead of being like, oh my God, I've gotten better at saying, oh, I'm going to learn something here that's really important because this is really awful. And there's probably a really important lesson that I'll be able to walk away from with this one. And so I think by just constantly trying to say, okay, I'm going to really try to practice what I'm preaching. I'm not going to try to deviate from that real goal of having time for work and time for my life. And when it's hard, just try to step back and say, okay, that was an awful month. What did I learn from it? And so I don't know if that makes sense, but those are some things that have guided me.
I like that. It makes a ton of sense. And something that you have said a number of times now is this idea of an integrated life. And that's not the way that we typically hear it spoken about. And there's almost this lexicon on your website, things like integrated life and flex and workflow and substitution. Where did that come from? And can you just tell us a little bit about what those concepts are? Because they seem very key to what you're trying to do.
Well, yes. And there's probably three simple things. One is every single job can be flexed just in a different way. And so you need to think about what job it is that you're doing and look for what we call a triple win, how to flex that job so it's good for you, good for your organization, and good for the people that you work with. So that's most important point number one. No matter what job you have, there's some sort of answer. But what happens in professional careers is as you move ahead, you get more experience, you get more unique knowledge, unique relationships. And so often what happens is you move ahead and you do your work and then some more work. And what our integrated leaders did was say, well, I actually don't have time to do this work and that work. So they got really smart at saying, what's the best use of my skills in this organization? And it turns out to be an integrated leader, one of the most important things is to be able to delegate. So a task you've done for the last 5 years gets passed on to a more junior employee as a way to develop that junior employee so that you have more time for that kind of stretch task that you want to learn and become more skilled around. And so the integrated leader says, I can't just keep on adding more and more to my plate. My plate is X big because I want to get out here and see my kids. I've got Fridays with my kids, or I've got, I happen to have for years, I had Thursday afternoon and Friday afternoon after school with my kids. My husband had Monday afternoon and Tuesday afternoon with our kids. And then on Wednesdays, we did a bunch of different things. And, I just got very smart at saying, here's how big my plate is and what's the best use of my time at work. And if I can't get it all done, either I've got to figure out who I can delegate it to, or maybe we just don't even do it, or we do it at a slower pace. And so that idea of substitution, our integrated leaders showed us that, instead of thinking of themselves as the ones only person who could get it all done, in order to have time for life, they got really good at delegation, at finding a substitute for some of the work that they do.
That's really interesting when you think about too. I recently had a guest on who she spoke a lot about how essentially her work teaches people how to divorce their value, meaning financially what they earn, from the identity they put around how many hours they're working in a day. Yeah. So, it sounds really, in some ways, it sounds really similar to what you're talking about here, because, she really teaches people how to do this. I'm blanking on what episode number it was. But Amanda Loveland, she just does great work about helping people see that their value to their organization and in their career isn't necessarily dictated by how many hours they work. But what she noticed, and what I'm curious is if you've noticed the same thing, when we think we're the only one who can do a task, or we think, oh, I'm so important that I need to be there, there's something gratifying in our identity that makes us feel super special, that we're the only one who can accomplish it. And I mean, really, that's not true. Like, we could really teach somebody else how to do this. But do you see people sort of fighting themselves as they're letting this go?
Yes, I think absolutely that's part of the equation. And just to be clear, it's multifaceted. So it is happening at the individual level. The person needs to get clear about their value. And it's not connected to how many hours they work. And I can tell you a great story about that in a second. But we also have to put it in the context of the organization. And some organizations are pretty clear with their unspoken rules that the more time you put in, the more face time you show up, the more you're willing to drop everything and travel, you are considered more valuable. So we call those work first workplaces. And in those organizations, it's a little bit about getting clear yourself, but it's also, you might be working in a workplace that's really got pretty strong messages about who's valued and who's not valued. And that's harder. Although I have to tell you, I was literally on a call today with an integrated leader from a workplace like that. So it's not impossible, no matter where you are. It's just harder in some places. But speaking of value, one of my leaders I've worked with, this guy I've known forever. He too has I think a 20-year-old daughter at this point. And when his son was born, I think 26 years ago, he and his wife both also decided that they really wanted to play an active role in their kids' lives, and so that they made this cool kind of combination of childcare and dad days and mom days, and they figured it all out. She's a doctor. He works at a huge consulting firm. He's a director at this consulting firm, so he's made a good career for himself. Well, at one point, because of some changes in family situation, there was an opportunity for them to take 6 months and do a sabbatical. Actually, I think it was 5 months and do a sabbatical. And, his wife kept on being the one who would come home and say, honey, how about we try this? And he'd be like, okay, let's try that. So she said, honey, why don't you you have that option at your organization to take a sabbatical. Why don't you take a sabbatical? We could get a Winnebago. We can drive all over the country. We can homeschool the kids for 5 months. What's the once-in-a-life opportunity? Let's do that. And he's like, okay, honey, let's do that. And then he left, and he's like, how the heck am I going to leave this organization, and are they going to want me back?
Right.
Are they going to want me back after 5 months? I know I'm doing a great job here, but really? Are they going to want me back? What risk I'm taking to say I'm going to go ahead and leave for 5 months and do this thing with my kids? Well, you know what? He did it. He's back. He's been back. And actually at the workplace, they ended up putting up a map on the wall and putting up little pins about where he was traveling during this amazing trip. And what he said was people couldn't believe how quickly the 5 months went by. So yes, we can totally box ourselves in, but with a little support from those around us who love us to think even bigger, the sky's the limit on what we can do too.
You've mentioned a few times now the importance of including men in this conversation from the beginning. And you shared your personal story of starting to look for a husband who shared the same values as you do or as you did. I definitely found that to be the case in my own life. It was really important to me for the person that I married to share those values as well. How has that shaped the way that you've put this organization together and the way that it's developed? Because so many times people look at work-life balance and there's a poster for work-life balance or a Facebook or a social media meme for work-life balance. And there's like this frazzled mom and this frazzled woman in like a business suit with a burp cloth on it or all these things, but that's not the story you're telling. So tell me a little bit about how that's developed and shaped the way that you think.
Yeah, no, let's get rid of that one. Instead, let's put a poster. One of my favorite moments. I always remember this moment because I just was so happy doing it. By Thursday or Friday afternoon, I was pretty tired. And so what a relief to end my workday at 3. And I remember picking up my son from school. I don't know, he was, I'm guessing, 8 years old. And me and his buddies played TV tag in the schoolyard together. Mm-hmm. And it was such a blast. I'm like, this is cool. I get to do work and I get to play with my son's friends and I get to play this goofy game that I used to play from my youth. That's what we're talking about in integrated life, really being able to feel successful at work and then have a lot of fun in life too. And yes, men are absolutely critical to that because for all kinds of reasons. If you just take sick days and you have sick children, if we just take that example, and we keep on solving sick days and sick children as moms staying home with sick kids.
Yep.
80% of employees have kids at some point in their lives. That means the organization's experience is that, moms are the only ones who take care of sick kids. And, if I was an organization and I thought that, moms were the only ones who were going to take parental leave, moms were the only ones who were going to take kids to doctor's appointments, moms were the only ones who were going to take care of sick kids, even if I didn't want to be biased, I'd be a little biased.
Sure.
And so we got to for 1,000 reasons, we got to get men involved because we need organizations to understand this is a human issue. Here's the more important reason, though. Men want this. There's so many reports that show millennial men want this. They're afraid, just like women, about how to make it work. But hey, ThirdPath exists. We can help you. This is possible. We can introduce you to somebody who's done it for 20 years. So, men want this. Organizations need to learn this. And boy, does it make a difference for women, And then if that's not enough, what have I modeled for my children? And if that's not enough, my husband and I have a great relationship because we've really understood both what it means to take care of kids and how it's hard to set some limits at work, but important so that you have time for other things. So we really know how to walk in each other's shoes and have a lot of fun together.
Absolutely. There's three pieces. You just mentioned walk in each other's shoes. There's something incredible about being able to understand that other person's perspective down to its core. I know what it's like to have a really stressful day at work and to come home like, blah, at the end of the day. And I also know what it's like for it to be 2 a.m. BTW, this happened last night, for it to be 2 a.m. and for my daughter to be sick and screaming. And I have no idea when I'm going to sleep tonight. I know what that's like. And my husband, on the flip side, knows the same thing. And so there's something empathetic there in the way that we relate to each other that allows us to talk about it and understand the other person's perspective. Yeah. Also, two bits of literature that I can't, when these pop into my head, I just go all nerdy and I can't help it. But from the psych of gender and psychology literature, this one's developmental psych, but there's a ton of research that shows the differential impact of if you increase the amount of time that a kid spends with their dad, their educational achievement increases, their emotional, ability to recognize and manage emotions, and a bunch of other amazing outcomes are impacted. And it's by being with their dad. Now there's some, factors there about maybe they're not there as often. And so they're coming up to par with the mom, whatever it is, but there aren't negative effects about balancing things out in terms of child development.
Yeah.
And then the last piece, sorry, go for that. Go for it.
No, go ahead. No, I want to hear yours.
Well, and then the last piece too is in close relationships, going back to that, there's a ton of research that shows how marital happiness and sex life is really improved as you start to share the burden of some of these household and then earning the responsibility of both of those sides. You understand each other more and nobody feels like they're kind of getting the short end of the stick.
Yeah. And although we can't talk about sex life on the radio, I can tell you that, I have been able to make time for each other as a couple all the way through, because that's what we've been really intelligent about. What do we want to, that's what integrated life is saying. What do you want to create time for and then make it happen? So since our kids were old enough for us to leave them for a weekend with my in-laws, Jeff and I have gone to Miami for a long weekend and hung out together and gone dancing. And at least once a year, we've had time together as a couple all the way through our relationship. And I think that's a huge, important part to make happen too.
So all of this sounds wonderful. It all sounds really great. And I think a lot of us would, really strive to try to achieve the integration and balance that you're talking about and could probably do a better job at it. But I promise, I guarantee that you've run across people who are like, baloney, no way, this isn't possible. That set of naysayers who are like, don't care what you're saying, I'm not buying it. Have you encountered those people?
Oh, absolutely. And you're not going to like my answer, but what I've figured out over time is, there's only so many hours and so much energy in the day. So we don't actually focus on the naysayers. As an organization, we have an expression. We're focusing on what we call the growing 20%. And we use that number purposely. We understand that 80% of the time when I'm talking to a group of people, or 80% of those people, are going to not believe men can change, are going to not believe that you can actually do your work better if you are thoughtful about just not throwing more time at the problem. They're just not going to believe it. And, my feeling is, gosh, I could spend 10 times the work on those people, or I could just support the growing 20% who get it. And so ThirdPath is really focused on the men and women who are ready for change and really ready to take the next step, and then supporting them to figure it out together. So we have events for those people every year. We have events for career counselors who want to really help couples think about this, or couples counselors, work-life coaches. We have an event every other year for them. And then we get together with these pioneering leaders and professionals every other year as well, so that we can kind of build those communities who are thinking differently. And together we can learn what the next step is. And then some come to our side because they're like, hey, that looks pretty good. So it's growing.
I'll have to admit that, you know, when you said you said the growing 20%, and then you're talking about being in a room where 80% of people are maybe not agreeing with what you're saying, or they're not completely bought into what you're saying, there's this pit in my stomach. I'm like, oh my God, this woman is fearless, because that sounds
I have
so
become
terrifying. Oh my God. Is there anything at this point, after seeing what you've seen and building this organization up and cultivating that mindset, is there anything that you're still afraid of? And if so, what would you do if you weren't actually afraid of it?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I think what I've learned is when I'm talking to a new audience that I don't know too well, I approach it one way. And I'm very thoughtful about how I approach it. And I very purposely pick a couple of stories that they're going to be able to relate to. And it's going to maybe open some more people's eyes. You know, so there's that kind of random group of people I'm going to talk to. But I think what's been happening, which is even more exciting for me, is that when I'm talking to that group of people who are ready to think bigger, I literally 3 weeks ago came up with an expression, be bold with the right people. So we have an event happening in a couple of weeks with these leaders on May 3rd. And we are going to be, you know, well, by the time this gets aired, this event will have occurred. And so I can actually tell you what we're going to be being bold with this group of people about. So what will I on May 3rd, we will have had a day where we talk to them about, in particular, we're talking about the new parent stage and how people should see it as an opportunity, not an obstacle. And that when that dad worked a 4-day work week when his son was born, he was learning key integration skills, and the company didn't have to pay a dime for it. In fact, they cut their expenses by 20% because he only earned 80% of his income, salary, and learned these amazing skills that he would then, and he's going to, on May 3rd, stand up and say, hey, when I did that, I learned an incredible way to do work that was much more effective that I'm still learning today now that I'm VP at this organization.
Wow.
And so on May 3rd, we're talking about how this integrated approach, when encouraged right from the start, helps men and women develop integration skills. So the big, bold idea I'm talking about at this wonderful event is I'm saying to them, hey, who wants to try an experiment? Because we want you to sign up with us and we want to work with you to think about this. What would it mean in your organization when a father comes to you and says, I'm about to become a father, or a man comes to you, I'm about to become a father, and you say to them, hey, great, which 3 months that are paid that you want to take off? And when you return to work, do you want to return for 1 year at 4 days a week or 2 years at 4 days a week? Because that's our policy for all the men in this organization and for all the women in the organization. There's not a negotiation, just which 3 months and how long for 4 days a week that you want to do. And so we want to get these organizations and these leaders to start thinking bigger about this opportunity of using the new parent stage as a way to support men and women to launch into this integrated approach and learn some of these skills and have a little bit more time to manage what can often be a very intense time of year. What do you think?
I mean, my mouth is like hanging open right now. Okay. So 2 things are happening. My mouth is hanging open right now, and I'm having flashbacks to those first few weeks when, you know, my husband wasn't able to be here at all, and you're like in the grind, and it's really hard. Yeah. Oh my gosh. And I'm actually also thinking about, I have a small audience who listens to me and comes to me from Europe. Hey guys. And I'm sure that they're all thinking like, look at these Americans and how crazy they are with these terrible policies around maternity and paternity leave.
Yep.
That's phenomenal. So who are the people, who are the attendees at this? Who's actually coming to it?
Well, we have leaders from large organizations, small organizations. I have this one leader from Colorado who has the most progressive organization you've ever met.
Nice.
So there's a real wide range. And if your listeners are interested, on May 11th, we're going to actually have some of the leaders who will be at this event speak. We have something called Thursdays with ThirdPath. So on the second Thursday of every month, people can join a webinar and learn about cool and exciting things. And on May 11th, we'll be talking about what happened at the summit and who signed up for this experiment, this big, bold experiment that we're going to be encouraging people to sign up for.
Oh my gosh. Yes. I love that so much. If you could send me a link, I would be happy to post that link for my audience, both on your show notes page, in your episode notes, so that those of you who are listening, if you are free and able to take part on the 11th of May, amazing event. It sounds incredible. I'm so curious to see what comes out of this.
Yes. I can absolutely share my link, and it's at 1 p.m. Eastern time on May 11th. So people will be able to totally join and hear what we learned on that day.
Right over lunch. No big deal. Central time, you're right over lunch. So we should be able to make that make that happen. Oh my God. I love what you're doing. I think it is so impactful. It would be so impactful for so many people if they could just find some tools and resources to be able to help them organize their day and organize their life a little bit more and set some boundaries to give themselves a little bit of margin and breathing room.
Yeah. And again, I think everybody's at a different point in the journey, and, you don't even have to have a kid to be wanting to figure this out. We really want to encourage early career professionals to think about this, and we think that OMG group is a way that they could get started, start meeting some people who are doing it. The earlier you start thinking about this stuff, believe it or not, I know it sounds wild and crazy, but my first job, real job out of college, I worked there for about a year, and then I went and said, it was a nonprofit, and I said, hey, you want to save 20% of my salary? I'm wondering if I could work 4 days a week. And I did that. No kids. I just did that because I wanted to see what would happen if I could try to figure out. I had other things I wanted to do. So, way before you have kids, I think trying to embrace an approach where you don't let work take over your life, but work be one important part of your life. You can start anytime. You don't have to wait till kids.
That's so great. And maybe that answers the question that I was just about to ask you, but maybe you have something else to share. I'm not sure. But so looking back over everything that you've built with this organization and the families that you've worked with and helped in these seminars that you've conducted, what tactical advice do you have for us? Is there sort of a tip or a trick you can share with us, or a resource or something that, we can take away from this episode, in addition, obviously, to the call, because that's massive value that you've already added to us by inviting us to this call. I mean, any other advice that you can leave us with?
Yeah, I have two ideas. One is something that you could do right now with if you're interested in making a change. I think the places where it gets hardest often is because you've got a child at home, and you've either it's a new baby, or you've gotten into some patterns at home that maybe aren't your happiest patterns between you and your partner, whatever your family system looks like. And I think one way to make a change, if you're trying to balance work and family, is to find a relaxed place to sit with your partner and say, hey, honey, things are hard, and I know we want to get them better. So we don't have to figure it out for tomorrow, but, let's imagine Sam 5 years from now. Today he's 3, but he's going to be 8 in 5 years. What do we want our lives to look like when Sam's 8 years old? What do you want, your life to look like? What do I want my life to look like? What do we want Sam's life to look like? What do we want as our lives as a couple to look like? And when you simply look at it from a 5-year later perspective, and kids grow up so quickly, often it can really help partners start imagining and getting on the same page around their goals. So that would be one small tip I'd give people, is to think in that 5-year increment around work and family. And the other I'd say is pick up a copy of Bridget Schulte's book, Overwhelmed. It's really one of the best books at explaining why we feel overwhelmed. And it's not just about us. It's much bigger than us. It's, in fact, a global issue. And she will, in a very fun way, help you walk through all the different factors that have influenced this. And, I think give you some insights about why the world could be different, too. So that would be another thing I'd do.
I love both of those. And, the 5-year exercise that you talked about, there's something about saying 5 years in the future that makes it feel a little less intimidating, and maybe makes people feel less defensive about having to change it now, today.
Yeah, and Bridget does a good job of explaining how men get caught up in the problem, just like women. And the conversation she had with Tom, she talks about in her book. So it helps you kind of understand the man's perspective better, because men are feeling as stuck by this system as we are.
You're doing such great work. I just love it.
Thank you, April.
This is so good. This is just phenomenal.
I have a lot of fun doing my work. It's and it feels like the world's, if you think about what I was talking about 16 years ago, it was a lot more radical. And today it feels like people are really just much more ready for it. So that's fun too.
I totally agree. And, it's funny. I was networking with somebody a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about, you mentioned the millennial generation. And lots of times people think, oh, millennials, those darn kids and their phones. And no, really, I think I'm on the old end of that generation, but like, we're in our 30s and we have kids. We're really not that young. And, we're really in this interesting situation where as a generation, and even, Z generation, or older end of the Z generation, you're in a place now where it's time to start thinking about what your values are as a leader, because if you're not leading your organization yet, it's really not very long before your generation will be the directors, the vice presidents, the chief, blah, 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 blah of a company. We're like on the footsteps of taking over the companies that we work for. And it's time to start thinking about the values that you want now and how you're going to manifest those when you're a leader who has massive reach over a very large company potentially.
Yeah, absolutely. It happens very quickly. And the more and again, back to something you said earlier on, and my answer was, I keep on trying to practice what I believe in every day. And when it's hard, I learn something. So absolutely, to imagine what you will be like as a leader that supports people to really live whole lives, that's what we've been nurturing, is a group of men and women who've really been doing family differently and really been doing leadership differently too.
I love it. This has been wonderful. I adore the work you're doing, and I just love the way that you are so thoughtful about how it can be applied to people in just a variety of family situations, because everybody's perspective and situation is unique. It's just been really, really great.
Thank you. I like what you're doing too.
Thank you. Thank you. It's really fun. So I have one last question for you, and it's the question that I ask every single person at the end of the podcast. We are compiling a Spotify Power playlist of motivational songs to keep people going and motivated all week long, and I have to ask you for your contribution to that playlist. So I need your favorite motivational song.
Well, it was fun to think about because the song came into my mind, and then I was like, oh, right. Like, it wasn't even like what's the song? It was like I started thinking about the song in my head because I've danced it to it so many times. It's Aaliyah, Try Again.
I love that song.
So there you go. Don't you want to sing it right now?
Yes, I do. Actually, it's in my head.
It's like, boom, it goes right into your head. Right. Because that's what we have to do. We have to dust ourselves off and try again, for sure.
That's phenomenal. This has been so great. Like I said, I so appreciate you being here, sharing the message and the mission of your organization, and just for being so authentic about the journey that you've had, that you don't have it 100% figured out every single day, and that you're not perfect at it, and you're still trying and working. That's always just wonderful to hear. So I appreciate you being so open and honest.
You're welcome. My pleasure. Keep up the great work.
Thank you.
I really hope you enjoyed that interview with Jessica DeGroot of the ThirdPath Institute. The thing is, I learn something from every single interview that I conduct for this podcast, but this time around, I've taken some pretty massive action. Just to give you a little idea of what I'm now doing that's different than what I was doing before, I actually shut down my email on my phone and on my computer when I'm working. I just don't want to deal with the distraction anymore, and it has really helped me focus. In terms of focus, I've started time blocking. So I'm giving myself 90-minute intervals where I'm completely immersed in a particular task with one goal for that 90-minute time point, and then I'm letting myself have a little break afterward. That's also really helping. And then the last thing that I've done is, she recommended that book, Overwhelmed. I actually picked it up and I listened to it on Audible, and it was phenomenal. She's right. The author does a great job of explaining why all of this happens to us and why a lot of the experiences we have with trying to juggle everything are so difficult. It was a phenomenal book. I really highly suggest that you pick it up. I know this is just the tip of the iceberg, so if you're like me and you have to juggle a lot of competing priorities on a daily basis, I highly suggest you check out the ThirdPath Institute at www.thirdpath.org. Sometimes we don't give ourselves the permission to create a little space, a little margin in our lives. We feel like we have to be accomplishing something at all times, and that's just not the case. We're allowed to be human, to rest, to rejuvenate, to play. And this interview was just a wake-up call for me. I also highly suggest you take Jessica up on her offer and attend her call on Thursday. The link to the call is embedded in this podcast description, and I've also included a button for it on her show notes page. It is at 12 o'clock Central, 1 o'clock Eastern. I really hope you can make it. Now, as always, I want to thank you for being with me this week. On that note, I have a favor to ask. I really, really, really want to hear from you. The thing is, I've started to build out the broader framework of what my website will ultimately be, and I'm so excited to be making progress on that front. But I can't do it without you, or I don't want to. So I want to hear from you. In what areas of your life do you feel like you're firing on all cylinders? What areas are going really well? In contrast, in what areas are you struggling, finding friction or white-knuckling it to get by? I'll have more information about what I'm planning soon, but I'd love to hear directly from you as I make progress on the broader vision for this community we're building. I also would love to hear your feedback on the podcast. So if you could drop me a rating or a review on iTunes, or even send me a note via aprilseifert.com, that would be phenomenal. And last, I'm always on the lookout for the next inspiring woman to feature on my show. So if you know her or you are her, reach out. I want to hear from you. Thank you so much for being with me this week, and until next time, have an inspiring week.